Welcome back, everybody. We're taking a deep dive today into a topic that's well, it's bound to get people talking. Political correctness.
Yeah.
We've all heard the term. We probably all have some thoughts on it.
Hmm.
But this deep dive is going to take us a little bit beyond those surface level arguments.
Yes.
We're looking at an article from the Spiritual Seek website, and it's exploring the psychological and spiritual consequences of political correctness. Kind of a unique angle.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we often hear about the social and the political sides of PC,
Right.
but this article really digs deeper into how it affects us personally, you know, like our sense of self, even our spiritual growth. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. How does this article actually define political correctness? Because I feel like sometimes it's used as this catch-all term,
Right.
and it can get kind of murky.
Yeah, it can be a landed term for sure.
Yeah.
This article defines it as like avoiding language or actions that could be seen as offensive or exclusionary or biased against certain groups.
All right.
You know, particularly groups that have faced discrimination in the past.
Right.
It really stresses the intention to promote inclusivity and respect.
Okay, so that makes sense. So it's about being mindful of the words we use.
Yes.
And how they might affect other people. It makes me think about, like, that change from saying, you know, disabled person to person with a disability.
Exactly.
It seems small, but it really shows a different way of thinking, I think.
Yeah, it's a subtle but powerful shift. It's about recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every individual and avoiding language that reinforces stereotypes or power imbalances.
I see. So the article doesn't stop at just definitions. It goes into these psychological traits that are associated with politically correct people. That's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the traits it highlights is this fear of repercussion. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Have you ever felt like you couldn't truly express yourself because you might offend someone?
All the time. Yeah, like sometimes I hesitate to share an opinion, even if I think it's valid, because I don't want to be judged or labeled. It's that whole cancel culture thing.
It is. And the article suggests that this constant fear of saying the wrong thing can lead to us censoring ourselves.
Yeah.
And it can prevent us from really expressing who we are.
No, you have to wonder, can we have open and honest conversations if we're always worried about offending someone?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? This is a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, we want to be respectful and considerate of others' feelings.
Of course.
But we also want to be able to express ourselves freely and have real conversations, even about tough topics.
So where does that leave us? How do we make a society where people feel safe to say what they think,
Right.
but also are mindful of how their words impact other people?
That's the million-dollar question. And the article really digs into this tricky issue by exploring the potential downsides of political correctness, both socially and psychologically. But there's another interesting point they make about the impact on our spiritual lives, which I hadn't really considered before.
Spiritual impact. Okay, now I'm really curious. This is where I think it could get insightful. Tell me more.
Well, the idea is that while political correctness might be a good step toward being more aware and sensitive,
Right.
it can become superficial, especially if it's not coming from a place of genuine understanding and empathy.
So you're saying it's possible to say all the right words,
Ah.
but not really embody the values behind them?
Exactly. That's where the spiritual dimension comes in. The article argues that too much focus on political correctness can actually hold us back from growing spiritually. It can prevent us from being authentic and connecting with others on a deeper level.
I see. I have to admit, though, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how this spiritual aspect plays out in real life. Got any examples?
Well, let's consider the concept of moral righteousness, which the article lists as a psychological trait often found in people who are very politically correct.
Oh, yeah, I remember that from the article. It's that I'm right, you're wrong type of thinking.
Exactly. And while having strong beliefs is admirable, the article suggests it can sometimes lead to feeling judgmental and superior towards those who hold different views. It becomes less about understanding and accepting different perspectives and more about being right.
I get it. So it's all about the intention behind our actions.
Right.
Speaking out against injustice because you genuinely want a fairer world is different from doing it to feel superior or boost your ego.
Exactly. And that's where the whole spiritual aspect of political correctness gets really interesting. The article argues that real spiritual growth is about developing compassion and understanding, even for people we disagree with. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and connecting on a deeper level, beyond just our opinions or beliefs.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea. If we're constantly judging and condemning those who see things differently, how can we create a more compassionate and inclusive world?
That's such a great question. And it leads us to one of the most thought-provoking parts of the article, how political correctness affects our ability to cultivate true compassion. It's a complex and fascinating topic, and I think it's worth exploring further.
Yeah, let's dive deeper into that.
So the article, it frames this whole discussion of compassion in a really interesting way. It says that while political correctness, it encourages empathy,
Right.
it can also, maybe accidentally, lead us into this sort of judgment trap.
A judgment trap. That sounds kind of scary. What does that even mean?
Well, it's like, we're trying to be more inclusive and sensitive. We can get so focused on figuring out who is and isn't following these ever-changing rules of correctness.
Oh, I see. So instead of approaching people who have different opinions with, like, curiosity and wanting to understand them,
Right.
we jump to labeling them as insensitive or even bigoted.
Exactly. And that's the trap. The article says that this rush to judge, even if we think we're doing it for social justice, it can create a wall between us and other people. It stops real connection and understanding.
It's like, I see this all the time online. It feels like there's less and less room for nuance these days. You're either totally woke or you're the enemy. It's exhausting.
That's such a good point. That feeling of exhaustion, that sense of always needing to be careful about what you say, it's not just bad for open discussion.
Yeah.
It's bad for our own well-being, too. The article actually talks about this, how this hypervigilance can lead to anxiety and stress.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like you're always walking on eggshells, scared to say the wrong thing and face backlash. I catch myself doing it sometimes, especially when talking about sensitive topics. It can be totally paralyzing.
And that feeling, that paralysis, it can keep us from having those tough conversations that are so important for us to grow, both individually and as a society. The article suggests that this fear of what others will think can really stop us from being our true selves.
Which brings us back to that idea of spiritual growth being stunted. We're so focused on appearing correct that we lose sight of our own inner compass, our own values.
Exactly. And the article takes this idea even further, exploring how this focus on outward conformity instead of real inner transformation can actually impact the evolution of what it calls collective consciousness.
Collective consciousness. That's a pretty big concept. Can you maybe break that down a little?
Sure. Think of it as like the shared beliefs, values, and attitudes that connect us as a society. The article says that for us to really move forward in this area, we need a shift in awareness that goes beyond just following social norms.
So it's not enough to just say the right things. We need to actually understand what those words mean.
Right.
And live those values in our actions and how we interact with others.
Exactly. And that's where the spiritual part really comes in. The article argues that when we focus too much on being politically correct, it can actually slow down the evolution of our collective consciousness.
How so? Wouldn't trying to be more inclusive and sensitive be a positive step in that direction?
It definitely can be. But the article is saying that if we're just trying to avoid offending people, instead of really trying to understand and connect with them,
Okay.
it can actually make us more divided and polarized.
So instead of bridging the gap between different views, we're just making more and more categories and labels, which actually pushes us further apart.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. The article uses the word duality to describe this. It's saying that when we get too caught up in who's in and who's out, who's right and who's wrong, we're actually making that feeling of separation and division even stronger.
Which is totally opposite of what real spiritual growth and collective evolution are all about, right? It's about realizing we're all connected.
Yes.
And fostering a sense of unity and compassion even when we disagree.
Absolutely. And that's why the article stresses the importance of balance. It's not about throwing away the ideas of inclusivity and respect. It's about approaching them with more awareness and nuance. It's about understanding that true progress requires both individual and collective change, a change in our consciousness that goes beyond just following social rules.
So it's not just about changing the words we use.
I know.
It's about changing our hearts and minds.
That's it. And this brings us to a really interesting part of the article where it introduces a quiz. It's designed to help people think about their own relationship with political correctness.
A quiz? That sounds kind of fun. Tell me more.
It's called Are You Politically Correct? And it asks you a bunch of statements that are meant to challenge your assumptions
Okay.
and make you think deeper about your own values and beliefs. One of the statements that really stuck with me was, "An innocent lie is better than an offensive truth."
Ooh, that's a tough one. It really gets you thinking about where the line is between being polite and being true to yourself.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about this quiz. It's not about getting the right answer. It's about getting you to examine what you believe and consider other points of view. It's about having a deeper conversation with yourself about what really matters to you.
It sounds like a great way to reflect on yourself. I might have to check it out. But I'm also really curious to hear more about your thoughts on this whole idea of balancing authenticity with the desire to be inclusive and respectful.
It's a tricky thing, for sure. But I think the key is to develop self-awareness and compassion, both for ourselves and for others. It's about paying attention to how our words and actions affect others,
Yeah,
while also staying true to our own values and beliefs.
I agree. It's about finding that balance where we can be ourselves without causing unnecessary harm or offense. But how do we actually do that in real life, especially in a world that can feel so divided and judgmental?
That's a great question. The article doesn't give a clear-cut answer, but it offers some really good insights that can help us navigate these difficult situations with more grace and understanding.
Well, let's hear those insights. What are some key takeaways that we can apply to our own lives?
So one of the biggest takeaways for me is that we really need to be curious and open to understanding viewpoints that are different from our own. The article says this is so important for bridging those divides and building real connections.
So instead of instantly judging or assuming the worst about someone with a different opinion,
Right.
we try to step back and see where they're coming from, which is easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. It takes a real conscious effort to change our mindset. Instead of being defensive or judgmental, we need to be open and curious. The article talks about asking questions, really listening,
Yeah,
and trying to see the world through their eyes.
I see. It's about recognizing that everyone has their own experiences and perspectives that shape their beliefs, and those perspectives are valid, even if we don't personally agree with them.
Exactly. And this brings us to another big takeaway from the article. True compassion is about recognizing our shared humanity. It's understanding that we're all connected and that what we do and say affects those around us.
It's like that saying, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. We never really know what someone else is going through.
Right.
So approaching them with compassion and understanding, even when we disagree, can make a huge difference.
I love that saying. It fits perfectly with this idea of shared humanity. The article says that this recognition can help us move past that us versus them mentality that so often leads to conflict and division.
So instead of seeing people who disagree with us as the enemy,
Yeah,
we see them as fellow human beings just trying to figure things out, just like us. It's about finding common ground and building bridges.
absolutely. And this leads to another really important point from the article, embracing nuance and complexity. It warns against falling into that black and white thinking,
Yeah.
where everything is either right or wrong, good or bad.
Life is rarely that simple, right? There's so many gray areas,
Right.
so much to consider, and so much we just don't know.
Exactly. When we try to force everything into neat little boxes, we oversimplify things and miss out on the richness and depth of human experience.
It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that nuance and complexity into how we approach political correctness, especially with these sensitive issues that can trigger strong emotions?
Well, the article suggests starting with humility. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
that we're always learning, and that it's okay to make mistakes.
It's about being open to changing our minds, seeing things from a different angle, and admitting when we're wrong.
Exactly. And it's about being willing to have those tough conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. It's about truly listening, trying to understand where the other person is coming from, and sharing our own views in a way that's both honest and kind.
So it's not about avoiding difficult conversations or censoring ourselves because we're scared of saying the wrong thing.
Right.
It's about approaching those conversations with curiosity, respect, and a real desire to connect.
That's a great way to put it. The article really emphasizes that real progress takes both individual and collective effort. It's about developing self-awareness, compassion, humility, and that willingness to engage in real dialogue. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and working together to create a world that's more just, equitable, and compassionate.
It's a powerful message and a good reminder that while the path toward more inclusion and understanding might be tough, it's definitely worth it. It's about always trying to be better, do better, and create a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued.
I couldn't agree more. And if this deep dive has made you curious to learn more about this topic, I really recommend checking out that Are You Politically Correct quiz in the article. It's a great way to reflect and understand your own values and beliefs better.
Definitely a great suggestion. We'll include a link to the quiz in the show notes for everyone. And to all our listeners, keep those minds open, keep those conversations going, and keep diving deep.